Sheduer Sanders, Carson Beck, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers. This is a talented quarterback class for the 2025 NFL Draft. We're going to rank our top 10 heading into the 2024 college football season. All this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Got to kick the intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at TheTalentCode. Keith, talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champion, and the other side to this dynamic duel that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to start this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. And if you can hear my voice, I know this is an action-packed show. So go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to comment, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel over at Locked On NFL Draft. DP. The gunslingers, man, we're talking quarterbacks. Yes, we're about to rank the 2025 NFL draft class as far as quarterbacks. So, listen, we haven't had discussion before we recorded this show. So, this is going to be some interesting conversations that happen on this podcast with DP. Before we jump into this conversation, why don't you hit him with our title sponsor?
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Keith, guys, talking about the top 10 quarterbacks entering preseason. This is week 0 for college football.
Yep.
Looking at our grades, Keith, over at the Draft Network, our top graded quarterback right now is none other than primetime Deion Sanders' son, Coach Prime's son, and his starting quarterback for Colorado, Sheduer Sanders. And Keith, like, he is one of the more natural throwers in this draft class as a quarterback, right? He's got a good arm, he's accurate, good ball placement. But to me, he's the best in terms of, like, when you combine, because he is an athlete, he can make plays with his legs, so he's mobile, he's a plus level athlete, good arm, accurate ball placement, he can access all 3 levels of the defense and both sidelines, right? So he can access the entire field. And when you combine all of that, he has the best overall skill set as a quarterback, in my opinion. He knows how to play that kind of point guard type of role where, hey, we don't need you to uncork 40-yard bombs every play. Hey, can you get it to that quick hitch at 5 yards and let him make a play? Can you get it to that quick square in from the tight end at 7? Let him get 12. Can you do those things in a timely fashion? And he showcases that. I think the big thing for him this year is going to be, now with the upgraded offensive line, can you not refrain from dropping back in the pocket? He was drifting a lot, and that's because, Keith, as we talked about this through cross checks, that offensive line for Colorado was tough. They struggled a lot, and that impacted him. But he is our highest graded quarterback right now.
Yeah, he definitely is. And so for me, I don't want to say it was splitting hairs, right? But it was close between him and Carson Beck. And you want to ask why did I give him the nod, DP? And it was because I felt as though I watched Sheduer in chaotic situations. Now, potentially, did he create some of that chaos? Sure, you can see he held onto the football too long. But when you really watch that Colorado offense, the addition that he had last year, there was a lot of bad situations, right? And so I watched him negotiate bad situations, still make good decisions, and still make throws, right? So the projection part of this would be, hey, if they gotten better, he would play better in structure, right? And I want to kind of talk about Carson Beck a little bit. Obviously, clearly talented. Like I said, I don't want to call it splitting hairs, but it was a close race for QB1 for me. Now, the thing is with Carson Beck, it was like, hey, obviously Georgia's a dominant football team, right? And when everything's good, you can look really good within this offense. And so that was the part where I was like, hey, I don't know if I've seen, Carson Beck versus Sheduer Sanders as far as one quarterback being pushed to the brink and one not having to, just because of the offense that he has around him.
100%. I agree with you. And I think, like you said, being able to see, because like you said, when we get to the league, it's easy to love a kid that's in a great situation in college. And George is one of the best, if not the best situation for any quarterback, right? Offensive line, run game, typically have a bunch of weapons, whether it's receiver, multiple tight ends who look like 7-year NFL vets, as college kids. It doesn't really matter, right? But when you look at that situation, it's like, all right, when you get to the league and now you're under duress, now you have pressure. Your offensive line isn't full of elite 5-star talents. It's kind of okay, you got a good left side, but your right side is a little leaky. Or you got a good left and right, but your interior is a little bit of an issue. And the team and the organization now has to either draft well or pay money to improve it. And then the weapons may not be the greatest out the gate. What do we always say? If you're drafted, typically as a quarterback, if you're drafted early in the first round, you go to bad situations. So it's like to see Sheduer. People got to remember, Colorado won one game the year before Sheduer and Coach Prime and Travis Hunter them got there. They won one game. So like that was a historically bad university and bad team. So to watch him kind of play well within chaotic situations, yeah, that told me something, right? And everybody, we expected them to lose to TCU. People thought it was going to be a blowout. They beat TCU. People thought they were going to lose, expected them to lose to Nebraska, because Nebraska had a better roster and more physical. They beat Nebraska, right? The Colorado State game that was the game for me where you look at any of these quarterbacks, that clutch gene, that ability for Sheduer Sanders, not saying that Carson Beck doesn't have it, but he hasn't been put in many opportunities like that. Like, that Colorado State game, you're backed inside your 10 and you got to drive the length of the field and score a touchdown. Like that was an NFL situation with the game on the line. Can you make the right reads and plays? And he was able to do that, Keith. But Carson Beck, when you watch Carson, I can't remember. I know you had a comp for Carson. I can't remember what the comp was.
The comp was, and people are gonna, kind of shrug their shoulders at this, but I want to put people in context. It was the very best of Derek Carr. So when Derek Carr,
yeah, that's right.
Pro Bowl seasons, and he was playing really well. I think when he had Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree, right? So it was that version of Derek Carr.
Gotcha. Okay, and I like that comp. I like Carson Beck. There was a throw, I think it was against Kentucky, across the middle on like a post route. I think it was to Marcus Rosemary Jack Saint. And you talking about layering the ball like precisely over the underneath defenders. And I think he ended up walking in for a touchdown. It's probably about a 40-yard throw. I think his arm talent is definitely NFL worthy. He's an NFL caliber arm, good arm. He's accurate himself. And even though he looks like a pure pocket quarterback, that's his style of play. He has enough mobility to get you 5 to 7, right? If it's 3rd and 5 and you drop back, you're running man and the rush lanes get past him, he can scoop for 5 to 7 and keep the chains moving. He's not going to be a guy you want to run QB option, QB read option, QB power. You don't want to do design stuff with him, but he's more of he can improvise if necessary, Keith. And I think for me, these are the two guys that are going to be slated as the top 2 guys probably for most of the draft cycle, before we get to like the Senior Bowl, see who goes to what, combine, and before the draft. I think these two, Sheduer Sanders and Carson Beck, going to be the top 2 guys for most of it.
Yeah, I agree 100%, but I think there's a mix to be thrown in this, right, with some of the names.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to have that conversation. So, DP, coming up next, man, we're going to talk about the rest of these quarterbacks on this top 10 list, right? Some of them we have to intro because people are not familiar with their names, but they have really good tangibles, right? And we know that the tangibles, as far as strong arm and being athletic, they do a lot for NFL scouts. So, coming up next, man, we're going to go through quarterbacks 3 through 10 on this 2025 NFL draft for the quarterbacks.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Guys, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel on this podcast. They are America's #1 sportsbook. We've discussed everything from college football preseason odds for Heisman, college football playoffs, MVP odds, preseason odds for the NFL. All of it got Super Bowl contending odds. All that stuff is on America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 to get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to download America's #1 sportsbook. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to download America's #1 sportsbook. Keith, before we further this conversation, I'm gonna go ahead and read off the other 7 to 8 guys. You know, we talked about Sheduer Sanders, Carson Beck. Our third quarterback on our top 10 rankings is Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. Our fourth quarterback is Quinn Ewers out of Texas. Our fifth quarterback is Donovan Smith, a sleeper name for the University of Houston, those Cougars. Our sixth quarterback is Cam Ward, quarterback from Miami. Our seventh quarterback is Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. Our eighth quarterback is DJU for Florida State. Our ninth quarterback is Max Brosmer from Minnesota. And our 10th quarterback is Drew Aller from Penn State. And Keith, we're going to start with Jalen Milroe. I think he is the X factor of this QB class. Now, I did say that Sheduer Sanders had the best combined quarterbacking skills, arm talent, movement in the pocket, visual, like he can read, high to low, lateral, all that type of stuff. But probably the best set of physical ability and tools has to go to Jalen Milroe. This guy probably can run 4.3, 4.4 at 225, 30 pounds at 6'2", rocket of an arm. He's a vertical passer, and it reminds me so much of Anthony Richardson and how we talked about him pre-draft is that he reads the field more vertically than horizontally. And it's like, once I can get you going and working that horizontal, playing better, it's going to just increase your efficiency, because then teams will have to run cover 3 and bring that safety down in the low hole range, because we're hitting those intermediate, those shallow crossers, those in routes. Then you can manipulate the coverage, then take it deep. Because if you're just throwing down the field, as we've seen in the NFL, it's a lot of too high shells nowadays. You got to be able to take what the defense gives you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And watching Jalen Milroe DP, obviously there were things to work on. I find it interesting, and it's our quarterback list, right? But and I'm gonna make this statement when you're talking about comparing quarterbacks 3 and 4. Jalen Milroe came at 3, Quinn Ewers came at 4, right? But I almost want to say they have the opposite strengths and weaknesses, right? Like, in a sense, is the fact that Quinn Ewers, I think he has a good arm, but I think there's a cap to it at the end of the day, right? And you know that. But then also with Jalen Milroe, right, we want to see him play with more anticipation as a thrower of the football, which Quinn does an excellent job of, right? Being able to throw it over the middle of the field, let the ball go before, wide receivers even get out of their breaks, right? So I think that's going to be an interesting, contrast. And I agree with you that if you go based solely off tools, that Jalen Milroe has the opportunity to shake things up and, maybe get teams to potentially buy in on him being QB1. I want to ask this, because Quinn Ewers, and he's not on the Spencer Rattler situation, right? But just what I'm talking about as far as quarterbacks that have been known for a very long time, Quinn Ewers is one of those names, right? I want to ask, is there any way that, in your opinion, that he can get to QB1?
Quinn Ewers?
Yes, Quinn Ewers. Yep.
Whew. I think consistency, right? I think just being consistent and in those big moments, right? We saw what he did against Alabama, right? That was truthfully in consistency and health, because he's been banged up. I think since he got to Texas. Yeah, he's been banged up, and if we can get that full season type situation for him, great. Because I'm looking at their schedule right now, Keith. They got a gauntlet. They have a gauntlet. Of course, they got Michigan September 7th. You have Georgia October 19th. You got Oklahoma.
I didn't know they started the season off with Michigan.
Yeah, man. They got Michigan, who is gonna be pissed off because of the whole the ruling and the whole stuff about the text message, all that type of stuff, the investigation. They're gonna be angry. So you got Michigan, you got Georgia on October 19th. October 12th, you have Oklahoma. You got to you play Florida. You do play Arkansas. You got Texas A&M November 30th. You got Kentucky November 23rd. They got a pretty nice tough schedule there. And so you talking about if Quinn Ewers goes up there, lights up Michigan. He goes up there and lights up Oklahoma, lights up Georgia, right? Does what he needs to do against Florida and Arkansas, and lights up Texas A&M. If he has that type of strong season, that's going to help him a ton in terms of just being consistent and showing that I can be that guy and be the catalyst to my team winning games. And right now, with that pressure of Arch Manning sitting behind you, you always going to have to look over your shoulder, because the one thing about fans will absolutely, we always say, what's the phrase? The backup quarterback is the favorite. Yeah, that's the favorite guy on the team, because if you're not playing to the standard, I think I was watching the interview from Steve Sarkisian on ESPN, and he talked about when he told Quinn, me and you both decided to come here. So we got to understand the expectations and the standard that is Texas Longhorns football. And I think that was something that Quinn may not have fully grasped, even though he's from Texas, just how big of a situation this is. So I think if he can go out there like that and ball out with that schedule, he will make a very strong run at QB1.
Yeah, and that's because I want to leave it open for the potential of movement, right? And like you said, just opportunity. And then I think this is going to be the other part too, DP, is that quarterbacks, more so because of the playoff situation, right? They're going to have an opportunity to make a big run, I think, down the stretch. And it's something that we should pay attention to in reference to these quarterbacks. And be like, okay, what do you mean? Is that they're going to have the opportunity to finish off the season really hot. So you get a guy like a Quinn Ewers or a Jalen Milroe, right, to where they played good, right? They played good during the season. But what happens is, DP, is that now we get to the playoffs, right? You have, what is a 12-team format, so you got 12 to 6. Like, you probably have including the conference championship, you have 4 probably prime time opportunities to like really showcase. So you can just get hot down the stretch, right? And then everybody, like, in that momentum basically carries you to the Senior Bowl, to the Combine, right? And everybody's like, nah, he's a clutch performer, right? Like, he's a national champion, things like that. So I think that's another thing that's going to be fun when we get down the stretch that we haven't. I just thought about it. We haven't even talked about, right? Is that just those quarterbacks that potentially just get a hot playoff run and able to capitalize, because we've seen it in the NFL, right? Joe Flacco, get hot playoffs, wins the Super Bowl, then gets paid, right? And we've seen it with other quarterbacks that get hot in the playoffs, win a Super Bowl, and then get paid. Well, the way you get paid here is that you go higher in the draft, right? So you get hot in the playoffs, you win the national championship, and then you get paid.
No, and Keith, we always talk about, like, with the Heisman throughout the season, you don't just win the Heisman off of stats. You win the Heisman off of moments, right? I think that we need to start kind of coining the phrase draft moments, because how do you go higher in the draft? People looked at Anthony Richardson and said, look at his numbers. There's no way you draft this guy top 5, right? He didn't have 4,000 passing yards and things like that. He didn't look super polished, right? But his draft moment was, you go back to the Utah game, right? The jump man 2-point conversion where he spins out of a sack and makes that wild throw and that wild play, late in that game. The 65-yard scamper where they played man coverage and forgot that 6'4", 240-pound quarterback runs a 4.3, and there's no spy, right? When you look at that, C.J. Stroud going second overall, his draft moment was the Georgia game, where he came out and checked every box and answered every question about his game. It's like, no, you guys think I'm a statue? No, I can move. I just choose not to. If I need to pick him up and put him down and get out of trouble, I can do that, and I can make guys miss. So I think Quinn Ewers has many opportunities in the 2024 college football season to make his draft moment. But Keith, it's crazy, because when you look at, of course, Sheduer and Carson Beck are where they are, that 3-4 spot is totally up for grabs. Even with Milroe, no matter how talented we know Milroe is, and how much we like his potential and ceiling, that QB 3 and 4 spot is up for grabs, whether it's Quinn Ewers or Milroe to take that 3rd spot, or someone else down this quarterback list.
Yeah, I agree 100% with DP. There's someone else we're about to talk about, those someone else's, if you can say it that way, that can potentially jump into that number 3 and number 4 spot. So coming up next, man, we're gonna talk about. We listed the names 5 through 10, but we're gonna talk about them, right? Like which guys that we were kind of down on, that most guys are still high on, and then which guys that we like, hey, circle this name right here. This guy has opportunity to elevate these draft boards really quickly. So coming up next, we're gonna talk about our quarterbacks 5 through 10 and who could jump to QB1.
Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout for being our everydayers. Keith, there's a little bit of a jumble here from, I would say, from 5 to 8. Donovan Smith, Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, DJU. You know, one thing I can say about all 4 of those guys from 5 to 8, supremely talented, physically gifted. All 4 of those guys. And I'm high, and I'm a little bullish on Donovan Smith. There's a little bit of projection baked into what I think he will be. And we talked about him during summer scout, and you asked me his athletic profile. I said, man, he's got the type of Cam Newton level athleticism where, no, he's not Lamar Jackson, but you got a big 6'5", 230, 40-pound quarterback with a rocket arm that can make legitimate plays with his legs, right? But with Donovan Smith, Cam Ward he might be the, like, I call Jalen Milroe the X factor. He might be the second X factor in this QB class.
This is what I think. Maybe you could call Jalen Milroe the X factor. Cam Ward's the wild card.
Yes, perfect.
And it's because every year, DP, that we've known of Cam Ward, and I think this is year 3, because I think we talked about him even when he transferred from, was it Incarnate Word? I can't remember.
Yeah, Incarnate Word, yeah.
Yeah, to Washington State, right? That he started off every year hot, right? And stuff just kind of stumbled, and then you didn't know. And this is where the volatility with his draft stock could come in, where he can elevate quickly. You didn't know if to point to in tough games, was it Cam Ward, or was it the fact that, potentially he was playing at Washington State, and if they played a better team, like a Washington or, maybe a USC or something like that, or Utah, right? They just didn't look good, or Oregon, right? Because those were better teams. Now he's at Miami, right? And you believe that Miami, at the very least, playing in the ACC, is that they have an average to above average roster, right? At the very least. And I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm saying like that's just the floor. So you shouldn't get in games against the North Carolinas, right, and look really bad, or other ACC schools, NC State, things like that, and look bad. You should be able to hold your own against a Boston College, right, and play. You talked about Quinn Ewers having consistency. I think this is the guy that needs consistency, DP. If he plays consistent football, who knows? You may be talking about him as QB2 in this class.
No, 100%, right? And what have we talked about a few times on this pod? That we've learned that how important reps in college really is. Trey Lance is probably the biggest, the disparity between Trey Lance and what we see with Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. What is it? It's not that Brock Purdy is more talented. It's Brock Purdy played a lot of football in college. So he saw a lot of things that defenses could throw at him. He knows how to play football at the quarterback position, and showing he can know how to do it at a high level. But that came with those reps. You watching the preseason with Trey Lance, whenever, like, as he starts, you can see when he's settling down in games. But it's the fact that I think there was a stat that Trey Lance only threw the ball like 550 times in between high school and so far right now in the NFL. Like, that's crazy. Cam Ward probably has 600 passing attempts in a season at Incarnate Word by itself. So that experience and those reps, and looking at their schedule real quick, Keith, they kicked the season off with Florida going to Gainesville next Saturday, August 31st. That's a big time game for them, right? Like, in the state of Florida, you got I think he's got Florida, USF, you got Virginia Tech. That should be a very big game with what they have over there and everything. And we left off their quarterback, Kyron Jones, but we're gonna talk about him on a different pod. But you got Florida State, Wake Forest, Georgia Tech. Their schedule isn't supremely tough, in my opinion. So the opportunities, when you see Florida State, you see Virginia Tech, you knock off Florida, you can create your draft moments there. And like you said, with Cam Ward, he epitomizes the term need to be consistent. Because if he can be consistent, like, what doesn't he have physically to do as a quarterback? He has everything: mobility, arm talent, arm slots. He could change the angles. It's just all about being consistent from snap to snap, game to game now, and then show up when the team needs you most in those big time moments. Because if you don't, that's probably going to be a narrative that sticks with you as a draft prospect.
Yep, with DP, I don't have the list directly in front of me, but I want to just
I got you.
round out this list and round out the conversation. So Jackson Dart, right? We know who Jackson Dart is, and it's a matter of him putting up numbers and playing really well inside the lane train, baby, inside that offense. DJU, right? We still put him up here because the tools. That's just how we feel, and we'll see what happens at Florida State, right? Max Brosmer, somebody you're familiar with, DP, grad transfer, right? I think he came from a smaller school, listed at QB9. But what I want to do is I want to close this out with quarterback 10, DP, because Drew Aller, some people draft boards, right? First round pick, or he's a top of the second guy. We have him at QB 10, behind some other names, right? And Drew Allen's a guy that people are excited, but I think that we owe that to our Locked On family to have the conversation of what we're seeing now and what we may project and why he's at QB 10.
Yeah, watching the tape of him, I think we both gave him a developmental draft grade, early day 3, late day 2 type of grade, and it's like he has a chance to be that Will Levis type of riser, in this class. Like, the arm talent is there. He's got enough mobility to get you yards. He can kind of improvise and move the launch point himself, and and move out the pocket and everything. But it's consistency. It's better decision making, accuracy. Like, he needs to put it all together to match the hype that we've seen from some analysts, some draft sites, whatever it may be. Like, having him as a first round pick, having him as a top 4 quarterback in this class, where when you get into the tape, it's just hard to buy into that right now. You can make the projection and use the hope and like, man, I think he can make that step. Yeah, everybody can technically every draft prospect can take a step, right? Like, it's all about who's going to make it. And he has the physical tools, but right now there's just some nuanced stuff that's missing from his game. This is a guy that I need to see him hit the layups, Keith. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't need a home run every play. Hit the ground ball. Let's get the first base, and let's go ahead and try again to the next bat. I don't need you to strike out by trying to throw everything through a brick wall and different things like that. And I want to see him operate better under pressure. That's when you really start to see the footwork get unraveled. The decision making becomes really erratic. It's like, man, you start, because what's going to happen, Keith? You go play defensive coordinator. It's like, listen, we have enough talent in the back end to play some man to man and kind of slow these routes up. Let's send pressure. Let's heat them up. And if you can't counter that and make them pay for that, they're going to keep doing it to you. And that's one thing NFL offenses don't need, is for their offense to be under siege by opposing defenses' blitz schemes.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm gonna wrap it up with this, that I watched the Ohio State game. I watched a few games, right? Probably 5 or 6 games of Drew Aller, because I know he was such a polarizing prospect. But the 2 games that I watched that stood out to me was the Michigan game and Ohio State game. And unfortunately, against the best competition, I think he had his worst versions of football, right? And it had nothing to do with one team overwhelming the other, right? Like, you can watch it and tell that guys were open. He just didn't play great football. So I just need to see more reps from him. And the opportunity obviously is there for him. Penn State's a good football program, right? They have, 2 running backs. They have weapons. They have a tight end. So the opportunity is there for him to elevate his draft stock. And plus, he's 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds that you can buy into the traits. But like you said, man, quarterback is more than just playing with the physical tools, right? There's the IQ part. There's a reason why Mr. Joe Burrow, Joe Shiesty is himself, right? Because there's an IQ and a level of, I guess, awareness and toughness that goes into playing quarterback. And so that's why Drew Aller came in at number 10 for us. But DP, that wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to end this podcast by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. All I can say is I told you so. I told you so. I told you so that was going to be a good show right there, man. Now, listen, go over to the YouTube channel, hit the like button. Don't forget to comment, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On NFL Draft. Listen, I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at the Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson, man. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. To get the latest episode as soon as it is available. On the audio side, guys, same thing with for YouTube. If you are a YouTube watcher, if you're an audio subscriber, Apple Podcast, Spotify, leave a 5-star review. Go ahead and rank the show. Continue to support your boys, DP and Keith and Coach K. You know what I mean? But on tomorrow's show, Keith, I think we should probably keep these rankings going a little bit as we get ready to preview, right?
Let's do it. I had a good time. I don't know if you want
I think we should probably hit those ball carriers, those running backs, or some of our favorite guys.
Let's do
I think we should hit that, Keith.
We support running backs over here, man.
We support running backs on the Locked On NFL Draft podcast because they do matter. But on tomorrow's show, we're going to get into those top 10 running backs and see where some of your favorite callers running backs land on our list. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.